Most people chase visible abs as if they are controlled by a single knob. Do more crunches, train harder, and eventually the six-pack appears. That idea sounds simple and motivating, but it doesn't hold up when you look at what actually determines whether abdominal muscles become visible. In reality, visible abs behave more like a system with several interacting parts. Body fat distribution, daily energy balance, sleep quality, stress levels, movement habits, digestion, and even posture all feed into the final result you see in the mirror. If any one of those elements is out of alignment, you can train your core relentlessly and still feel like nothing is happening. This is why many disciplined people experience the same frustration. They show up to the gym consistently. They push through hard workouts. They do hundreds of sit-ups or planks. Months go by, and yet their midsection looks almost exactly the same. The effort is real, but the outcome doesn't match the expectation. The problem is not necessarily a lack of discipline. More often, the problem is that the wrong variables are being monitored. When you approach the question like an engineer troubleshooting a system, the goal is not to push harder at the obvious component. The goal is to identify which inputs actually control the output. For abdominal visibility, the output is simple: how to find your midsection looks. But the inputs are multiple, and some of them operate quietly in the background. Most people already have abdominal muscles developed underneath the surface. The real issue is whether the conditions allow those muscles to be seen. The first step in understanding this is recognizing that visible abs are largely a body composition issue rather than a training issue. If someone performs compound movements like squats, deadlifts, carries, rows, presses, or sprints, their trunk muscles are already working extensively. The abdominal wall stabilizes the spine during these movements, meaning the muscles are receiving regular stimulation even if no dedicated exercises are performed. Because of this, many people who train regularly already possess reasonably strong abdominal muscles. They simply remain hidden beneath a layer of body fat. This leads to one of the most important principles in body composition. Fat cannot be selectively removed from a specific area through exercise. When someone performs hundreds of sit-ups, the abdominal muscles beneath the fat become stronger. However, the body decides where fat is removed from based on genetics, hormones, and overall energy balance. The fat loss process happens systemically across the entire body rather than locally from the area being exercised. This explains why two individuals can follow the same training plan and experience completely different visual results. Imagine two people who both lose 5 kilograms of body weight over several months. The first person might notice their face becoming sharper, their arms leaning out, and their shoulders becoming more defined, while their lower abdomen remains relatively unchanged. The second person might lose fat more evenly across their body, causing their abdominal muscles to appear earlier. Both people lost the same amount of weight. Both followed similar training routines. The difference lies in how their bodies distribute and remove fat. This is one of the quiet variables that people rarely consider when judging their progress. If your body tends to store fat around the abdomen longer than other areas, it simply means that visible abs will appear later in the fat loss process. The real question therefore becomes, are you lean enough in your own biological pattern for abdominal definition to emerge? Understanding this helps shift the focus away from endlessly adding more of exercises and toward the factors that actually determine body composition. One of the most common failure points is energy balance. At its simplest level, fat loss requires a consistent caloric deficit. This means the body must expend slightly more energy than it receives from food over time. When this condition persists, stored energy in the form of fat begins to be used. However, many people unintentionally miscalculate their true energy balance. Hard training can sometimes create the illusion of a large calorie deficit. A demanding workout may feel exhausting, which leads people to assume they burned a massive amount of energy. In reality, the energy cost of exercise is often lower than people expect. A challenging 45-minute workout might burn somewhere between 300 and 500 calories for most individuals. That number can vary depending on body size, intensity, and fitness level, but it rarely reaches the dramatic numbers people imagine. Now consider what happens afterward. If someone finishes that workout and rewards themselves with an extra meal, dessert, sweet coffee drink, or large snack totaling 700 or 800 calories, the deficit they created during exercise disappears instantly. From the body's perspective, the day may have ended in energy balance or even a surplus. Another hidden effect of intense training is the reduction of spontaneous daily movement. When someone performs extremely demanding workouts, they often feel fatigued afterward. That fatigue can reduce the amount of unconscious movement they perform throughout the rest of the day. They might sit more, walk less, or skip small physical tasks simply because they feel tired. This phenomenon is sometimes called compensation. The body subconsciously reduces energy expenditure elsewhere in response to heavy training loads. As a result, the total daily energy expenditure may not increase as much as expected. Weekends also play a surprisingly large role in this equation. Many people maintain relatively structured eating habits during the work week, but loosen those habits significantly on Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday. 2 days of high-calorie meals, alcohol, snacks, and restaurant portions can quietly erase the entire weekly deficit created during the previous 5 days. From a systems perspective, this means the average weekly energy balance remains close to maintenance. If maintenance is maintained, body fat stays roughly the same. This is why tracking trends becomes more useful than relying on feelings. An engineer troubleshooting a system would not rely solely on subjective impressions. They would observe measurable outputs over time. In the context of body composition, two of the most informative indicators are body weight trends and waist circumference. Daily body weight fluctuates naturally due to water balance, digestion, sodium intake, and hormonal changes. For this reason, the daily number on the scale is less useful than the trend over time. A practical approach is to weigh yourself in the morning under similar conditions and calculate a rolling weekly average. When that average gradually moves downward over several weeks, it indicates that a caloric deficit is present. Waist circumference provides another valuable signal because abdominal fat contributes directly to that measurement. Even when body weight changes slowly, a reduction in waist measurement often reveals that fat loss is occurring. If neither body weight nor waist measurement changes over a period of 2 to 4 weeks, it strongly suggests that the current energy balance is not producing a consistent deficit. At that point, the solution is not to dramatically overhaul every habit at once. Instead, one variable should be adjusted while keeping other conditions stable. For example, someone might slightly reduce portion sizes at dinner, remove a daily sugary drink, or add a moderate amount of walking to their routine. Observing the effect of that single change over the next couple of weeks provides clear feedback about whether the adjustment is working. Another essential factor in maintaining muscle definition during fat loss is protein intake. When calories decrease, the body draws energy from stored tissue. Without sufficient protein and resistance training, some of that tissue may come from muscle rather than fat. Loss of muscle can create the illusion that body composition is not improving. Even if weight decreases, the physique may appear softer because the underlying muscular structure is diminished. Protein helps protect against this outcome by supporting muscle repair and maintenance. For many individuals, a daily protein intake between approximately 1.6 and 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight provides a strong foundation. For someone who carries a significant amount of excess body fat, using their target body weight rather than current weight often produces a more practical estimate. Consider two individuals who both lose 6 kilograms of body weight over several months. The first person maintains a high protein intake and continues performing strength training regularly. Most of their weight loss comes from body fat, while muscle mass remains relatively stable. As a result, their physique appears sharper and more defined. The second person consumes relatively little protein and trains inconsistently. During the weight loss process, they lose both fat and muscle. Even though the scale shows a reduction in body weight, their body composition does not improve as dramatically. The abdominal area may still appear soft because the muscular foundation beneath it has diminished. This difference highlights why losing weight and improving body composition are not always identical outcomes. Nutrition quality and macronutrient balance influence how the body partitions weight loss between fat and muscle. Sleep and stress introduce another layer of complexity to the system. When sleep duration is chronically restricted, the hormones that regulate hunger and satiety become disrupted. Signals that promote hunger increase, while signals that promote fullness decrease. This combination makes it harder to maintain consistent eating patterns. At the same time, fatigue from poor sleep reduces motivation for physical activity and decreases training performance. Stress compounds these effects by influencing both physiology and behavior. When people experience sustained psychological stress, decision-making around food often becomes less consistent. Cravings for highly palatable foods increase, and adherence to planned habits becomes more difficult. Elevated stress can also disrupt digestion, sleep quality, and recovery from training. Interestingly, many people experience significant improvements in fat loss progress simply by restoring sleep duration to 7 or 8 hours per night. Once sleep improves, hunger signals stabilize, training feels more manageable, and adherence to nutrition plans becomes easier. The body's systems return to a more balanced state, allowing the underlying energy deficit to produce visible results. From a systems perspective, this is not mysterious at all. The inputs have simply been corrected, so the system can function normally again. Training itself also deserves careful examination. High-intensity exercise is valuable and can improve cardiovascular fitness, metabolic health, and athletic performance. However, when every workout is performed at maximum intensity, recovery demands increase dramatically. Excessive high-intensity interval training, constant heavy lifting without recovery periods, and stacking multiple demanding sessions together can create a chronic fatigue state. In that state, hunger often rises, sleep quality may decline, and daily movement outside the gym tends to decrease. None of these outcomes help create the consistent environment needed for gradual fat loss. A more balanced structure usually works better. Strength training several times per week builds and maintains muscle. Moderate aerobic activity such as brisk walking or steady cycling supports cardiovascular health and increases daily energy expenditure without overwhelming recovery capacity. In addition, maintaining a reasonable level of daily movement through steps or light activity contributes significantly to overall energy balance. These quieter forms of movement often accumulate far more energy expenditure across the week than a single intense workout. Taken together, these factors illustrate why visible abs rarely emerge from one isolated change. They appear when multiple components of the system begin moving in the same direction. Energy balance becomes consistently negative, muscle mass is preserved through adequate protein and resistance training, sleep and stress stabilize behavioral patterns, and daily movement supports overall energy expenditure. Only then does the layer covering the abdominal muscles gradually thin enough for their structure to appear. In the next part, we will look at the remaining hidden variables that often mask abdominal definition, including posture, breathing mechanics, digestive factors such as bloating, and how genetics influence the final appearance of the abdominal wall. We will also build a practical diagnostic framework that allows you to test and adjust the system step by step instead of relying on guesswork. In the first part, we looked at the major structural drivers behind abdominal visibility: body fat levels, energy balance, protein intake, sleep, stress, and training structure. Those are the primary levers that determine whether fat gradually comes off the midsection and whether the muscle underneath stays intact. But even when those factors are mostly correct, there are still a few quieter variables that can dramatically influence how your midsection looks day to day. These variables don't necessarily change body fat itself, but they change how the body presents what is already there. If you think of your physique like a system, these are part of what could be called the presentation layer. They affect how the outcome appears even when the underlying structure hasn't changed much. One of the most overlooked factors in this category is posture. Many people assume that a protruding abdomen automatically means excess fat. In reality, body alignment alone can create the illusion of a belly even in relatively lean individuals. The relationship between the rib cage and the pelvis determines how the abdominal wall sits in space. When those two structures are not aligned well, the stomach can appear pushed forward. A common pattern responsible for this is called anterior pelvic tilt. In this position, the front of the pelvis tilts downward while the lower back arches excessively. When this happens, the abdominal wall lengthens and loses its natural tension, which causes the stomach to appear more prominent. Another contributor is rib flare. When the rib cage lifts upward and outward instead of staying stacked over the pelvis, the abdominal muscles cannot properly stabilize the trunk. The result is a forward projection of the midsection even if body fat levels are relatively moderate. You can see this effect instantly if you experiment with posture. Stand in front of a mirror with a relaxed stance and allow the lower back to arch while the ribs flare outward. The abdomen will likely appear larger and less defined. Now adjust the position by gently bringing the ribs downward and aligning them over the pelvis while maintaining a neutral spine. Often the midsection appears flatter immediately. Nothing about body fat changed in those few seconds. What changed was the mechanical alignment of the trunk. This is why posture correction alone can sometimes make a noticeable difference in how the abdomen looks. The muscles responsible for maintaining good trunk alignment include the deep abdominal muscles, glutes, and certain stabilizers around the hips and spine. When these muscles are underactive or poorly coordinated, the body tends to default into positions that exaggerate abdominal protrusion. Strengthening and retraining these muscles does not require complicated routines. In fact, the most effective exercises are usually simple stability movements that teach the trunk to resist unwanted motion. Exercises such as the dead bug train the abdominal muscles to prevent excessive arching of the lower back. Side planks challenge the body to resist lateral bending and maintain stability through the torso. Pull-off presses train anti-rotation control, helping the trunk remain stable when external forces try to twist the body. Glute-focused movements also play an important role. Exercises like hip thrusts, Romanian deadlifts, and split squats strengthen the muscles that control pelvic position. When the glutes function properly, they help maintain a neutral pelvis during both movement and standing posture. Mobility work for the hip flexors can also be useful. When hip flexor muscles become tight from prolonged sitting, they can pull the pelvis forward into an exaggerated tilt. Gentle stretching combined with strengthening of the opposing muscles often restores balance over time. Breathing patterns influence the system as well. Many people breathe primarily through shallow chest expansion, which lifts the ribcage upward and maintains a state of rib flare. When breathing is redirected into a deeper diaphragmatic pattern, the ribs tend to settle downward and the abdominal wall engages more effectively. A simple way to practice this is through controlled breathing with a long, slow exhale. As the air leaves the lungs, the ribs naturally move downward and the deep abdominal muscles activate to stabilize the trunk. Over time, practicing this pattern during exercise and daily movement can improve the natural resting position of the torso. Another factor that frequently hides abdominal definition is bloating. Bloating is often mistaken for fat gain, but the two are completely different processes. Fat accumulation occurs slowly over weeks and months. Bloating, on the other hand, can change the appearance of the abdomen within hours. Digestive contents, water retention, and gas accumulation can all temporarily expand the abdominal cavity. When this happens, the midsection appears smooth and swollen, even if body fat levels have not changed. Several common lifestyle habits influence this effect. Large swings in sodium intake can alter water retention. A meal that is unusually salty may cause the body to hold extra water for a short period of time. Similarly, inconsistent hydration can lead to temporary water fluctuations. Fiber intake also plays a role. Fiber is beneficial for digestion and overall health, but dramatic increases in fiber consumption can cause temporary bloating as the digestive system adjusts. If someone suddenly jumps from a low-fiber diet to a very high-fiber diet, the gut may produce more gas during the fermentation process. Carbonated beverages introduce gas directly into the digestive system, which can expand the abdomen temporarily. Alcohol can also contribute by irritating the digestive tract and altering fluid balance. Food sensitivities are another possibility. Certain individuals experience bloating when consuming large amounts of dairy, high FODMAP foods, or other ingredients that their digestive system processes less efficiently. The important point is that bloating fluctuates daily. This means that judging abdominal progress based on a single mirror observation can be misleading. Someone may appear lean and defined one morning and noticeably bloated the following evening after a large meal or stressful day. The underlying body composition remains the same, but the visual presentation changes temporarily. Consistency in eating patterns often helps reduce this variability. Maintaining relatively stable fiber intake, staying well hydrated, and paying attention to foods that trigger digestive discomfort can make the abdomen appear more stable from day to day. Genetics also influence the final look of abdominal muscles. The rectus abdominis muscle, commonly known as the six-pack, is divided into segments by connective tissue bands called tendinous intersections. The number and arrangement of these intersections vary between individuals. Some people have symmetrical blocks that line up neatly across the midline. Others have slightly staggered segments that create an uneven pattern. Some individuals naturally display 4 visible segments while others show 6 or even 8 depending on their anatomical structure. These patterns are determined by genetics and cannot be altered through training. Muscle thickness and insertion points also influence how pronounced the abdominal muscles appear once body fat becomes low enough. 2 people with identical body fat percentages may display very different levels of visible separation simply because of differences in muscle structure. Understanding this helps prevent unrealistic comparisons. The goal is not to replicate someone else's abdominal shape, but to improve your own body composition and functional strength. Once all of these factors are considered together, the path toward visible abs becomes much clearer. Instead of chasing endless workouts, the focus shifts toward managing the entire system that determines how the body looks and performs. A practical way to approach this is through a structured observation period. Begin by collecting a few basic measurements for several weeks. Morning body weight, averaged across the week, provides a useful trend indicator. Waist circumference measured at the level of the navel offers direct feedback about abdominal fat levels. Progress photos taken under similar lighting conditions every couple of weeks provide a visual reference that is less affected by daily fluctuations. These measurements act like instrumentation in an engineering system. They provide objective feedback about whether the current inputs are producing the desired output. If waist measurements and weight trends move downward gradually, the system is functioning as intended. If the numbers remain unchanged over several weeks, it means the inputs need adjustment. The key is to adjust only one variable at a time. For example, someone might remove a daily high-calorie beverage, such as sweetened coffee or soda. Another option might be increasing daily walking by a modest amount, such as adding 2,000 additional steps per day. Small changes often produce surprisingly consistent results when maintained over time. Training can also be organized in a way that supports long-term consistency rather than constant exhaustion. Strength training several times per week maintains muscle mass and improves overall body composition. Low-intensity cardiovascular activity such as walking, cycling, or light jogging increases energy expenditure while remaining easy to recover from. Dedicated core training does not need to be excessive. Short sessions 2 or 3 times per week are usually sufficient when combined with compound exercises that naturally engage the trunk. Core exercises should emphasize function rather than endless repetition. Anti-extension movements train the body to resist excessive arching of the lower back. Anti-rotation exercises build the ability to stabilize the torso when forces attempt to twist it. Anti-lateral flexion movements strengthen the muscles that prevent the spine from bending sideways under load. These functions reflect how the core operates during real-life movements and athletic activities. Finally, several quiet multipliers influence whether all these habits remain sustainable. Sleep duration strongly affects appetite control and recovery. When sleep is consistently limited, hunger increases and motivation for training often declines. Daily movement habits also matter more than many people realize. Thousands of small steps accumulated throughout the day contribute significantly to overall energy expenditure. Stress management is another multiplier. When life becomes chaotic and unpredictable, adherence to nutrition and training routines tends to decline. Simple routines such as regular walking, consistent training schedules, and structured meal patterns can stabilize the system. When all of these pieces begin working together, the results usually appear gradually but reliably. Fat slowly decreases, muscle remains intact, posture improves, digestion stabilizes, and the abdominal wall begins to show through. At that point, the pursuit of visible abs no longer feels mysterious or frustrating. It becomes the natural outcome of a system that is finally operating in alignment.